I will mostly be focused in this presentation on the business reasons for expansion. There are a number of reasons for expansion, including, growing the cooperative economy and bringing our successful co-op to another community. But, especially for this group, I sort of want to focus in on where we are, how we got here, and sort of bring a level set for everyone before we start talking about what the second store could and might look like. So we have a version of this on the website, on a dedicated page for the expansion, tpss.coop/expansion. That is a living site, just like we had for the remodel. So we'll continue to update that over time and update the project timeline and where we are. But very briefly, we started looking at this topic in 2022. And part of the impetus for that is our sales growth is maxed out, has been maxed out, and we'll look at some charts on the next page to you know sort of look at that in a little more stark relief. But the metric that's typically used in grocery is sales per square foot. What that essentially tells you is there is a point at which you won't be able to reasonably grow your sales over time. You are going to be growing essentially on the cost increases that you get from vendors. But instead of growing in the 5 to 8% range, you sort of settle down in the 1 to 3% range. And there are physical factors that are limiting, your registers, the amount of product that you have in the store, parking. If you can imagine adding 10% of sales from, getting 10% new customers um, every year, and after 3 years, the store being 30% busier than it is now, you can kind of see why that growth trajectory just naturally doesn't happen. There's a point where, shopping in the store just becomes uncomfortable. So we have been, and we are at a point where our sales are really growing at just 1 to 3% every year, and we have uh, expenses basically outpacing sales growth. That's already been happening for a while, and we'll look at what that looks like over time. So part of this second store expansion project is bringing sales relief to the current store. There will be some benefits, certainly that accrue. So it's not all about, staving off worst case scenarios here. The Everything in grocery runs on volume. So, we are already a relatively high volume single store. But adding a second location would give us, better purchasing power. And if that location is larger than our current location, it would, especially in our contract with our larger vendors, result in better unit pricing, both at the second store and at the current store. Another thing people have probably heard me talk about if you've come to member meetings is diversification of our business. I always say right now we have all of our eggs in one 4,200 square foot basket. That has been challenging during COVID. That was challenging during the development of the parking lot potentially. Was challenging during the remodel project. So we at the end of the day, we operate out of a store that we don't own. We don't own the parking lot next door. And so, anytime there's any disruption to our current single store operation, we bear the brunt of the hit on sales income if we have to close for a day due to anything in just our single location, as opposed to being diversified and having a second location where anything that happened to a single store, you can sort of spread out that impact a little more. Um, Enhanced operations is certainly a part of that the biggest piece, even after the remodel. I'm sure some of you have walked back to the bathrooms and sort of seen what our back of the house looks like. We for a store of our sales volume, we still have absolutely no backstock space. We have nowhere overnight where we could, buy a pallet of, something on a really great deal and be able to store that pallet overnight. We literally don't have an extra 4x4 space in the back that is, able to even take one extra pallet, let alone, buying up on special deals or being able to weather. We had a situation last spring where UNFI, our major vendor, had a cyber attack, and we were unable to get regular trucks for a little while. Stores that had bigger warehousing space and more product on hand were able to keep their shelves a little fuller than we were. So part of this would be looking for a second store that had warehousing space that could service both locations. And then the last and important piece is, we have lived a very competition-free existence since we moved to this building in 1998. We'll actually look a little bit at our trade area on the very last slide, but we have not had any other grocery store open within our core trade area in the 28 years that we've been operating at the junction. Um, the businesses that have opened and closed, like the Lidl over on New Hampshire or the George Avenue Walter Reed Project Whole Foods, those are all outside of our trade area. We didn't see any benefit when the Shoppers closed. We didn't see any hit to our sales when the Lidl opened there. However, we are going to have to deal with competition at some point in the next couple years, closer than we ever have before. There is grocery slated for the project at the Tacoma Metro Station. There's potential grocery in the old 7-Eleven building and other development happening, especially on the DC side. So right now we are in a position of strength where we have not seen another grocery store open in our trade area and start to take away sales from us, and then begin this multi-year process of reacting and looking to open a second location. So staying ahead of that is important. All right, so now to the graphs. Um, so what these two graphs are showing, the graph on the left is a 10-year sales trend. So you can see in years 5 and 6 there, I stripped out the remodel just because that is such an outlier. But essentially we had a couple years of COVID when we were doing online sales and our sales dipped, came back up. But broadly speaking, and again, this gets to that sales per square foot metric. Our sales on average, looking backwards 10 years, are only growing at about 1.2% on average. Our expenses, the graph on the right, are growing at an average of 3.1%. So, very big picture, our expenses are growing faster than sales over time. So this is a different expression of that. The red line is our income from sales. So that is after we pay for cost of goods, the cost of all the groceries that we sell. That is the amount of money that we have to pay all of our expenses. So this is starting back in 2015. So you can see we had a healthy distance between our sales between our income and the purple line, our expenses. Those numbers flipped during COVID, during the 3 years of COVID there. In the middle of the chart, where there's the downwards trend, we obviously filled that hole with some of the federal funds that we got. But we were able to get back out and have that red line the last few years just barely, but cross our expenses line, and that red arrow shows our current year, July of 2025 through June of 2026. What I budgeted for is a very narrow income, of our income being slightly above our expenses. So from that point, I took a sales growth of 2.5%, so being a little generous to the trend that we have, and an expense growth, again, that purple line of 3%. And so you can see over time, as just that, everything in grocery runs on very small percentages. You can see as those lines diverge, there at the end of the graph in 2036, that's about $200,000 in that year. So if you don't do something, to correct for these trends, you can very quickly get to a place again where your expenses are growing much faster than your income. In reality, we would not operate the store in a way where we just allow that to happen. So in any individual year, it's actually required by the board, who has the oversight role within the store, that I turn in balanced budgets. So these are just examples of the types of things. If we were in a situation where we had our expenses were outpacing our income, the kinds of things that we might need to look at cutting. And a lot of these to me are the things that we do very well, the things that sort of make us proud as a co-op, and as members. So the donations that we make, the our largest expense is staffing, and so either staff positions, year-over-year increases, our benefits package, those kind of things. Oversight costs. We are do an audit every other year, but we also do financial reviews. And so, there's a price tag with those things. Our operation systems that allows us to keep track of our finances very well, that allow us to have a really high quality point of sale system. At this right now, for a store of our size, we have very quality operational systems. If you are in a place where you're needing to cut cost, you're cutting back on some of those systems. And to be very clear, there's no plans to touch any of these things, but this is to, sort of paint the picture. Member discounts, I think we have a great member discount program. Certainly not something that I have any interest in touching. Or, absolute worst case scenario would be raising prices, which again, nobody particularly wants to do. Um, so that's all on the negative side. I want to bring us out of that and focus just a little on the positive side. By engaging in this project to open a second location, it gives us a tremendous amount of opportunity. Growing the cooperative economy, every dollar that we take away from grocery stores that are owned by billionaires, that are controlled by corporations, and bring into the cooperative economy, can have tremendous effects on the community in which that store is located, both by hiring local staff, paying them good wages, increasing the amount of product that we buy, and again, as a system, getting greater purchasing volume that can accrue to better prices for both stores. So I put that little note in the upper left, just to note, if there will absolutely be members of our co-op that have no interest in shopping at the new store. The current store is convenient for them. They love it. Whatever reason, maybe they'll never even set foot in the second store. There will still be benefits that accrue to people that shop at the current store. So obviously better unit pricing, improved warehousing that we talked about. So being able to have more product on hand, and not have holes on the shelf. Organizational stability. So being able to avoid any of those cuts to systems or to staffing or to our work in the community. And then also, the area that we're looking in that we'll talk about on a subsequent slide. We do intentionally want to have some people that shop at the current store move over to the new location, and so that will bring some sales and crowding relief to the current store, and make it a little more comfortable and a little quicker to shop. So the biggest question that we get is where's this going to be? So you can see on the uh, red star is the current location. That black circle is probably the outer reaches of our trade area, where our core trade area, where most of the shoppers come from, is a little tighter, which again we'll look at. And we're looking in essentially a 4 mile radius around the store. So broadly speaking, that is a lot of Northwest DC, east of the of Rock Creek Park. That is, bits of Silver Spring, Wheaton, Chevy Chase, College Park, University Park, Hyattsville. Um, there's not a hard line of demarcation. We can and will look outside of that radius, but the ability to service the current store with warehousing product that can move back and forth, and like I talked about, with being able to pull off some of the sales from the current store, the being inside of that 4 mile radius is going to help us um, to accomplish that. The site characteristics that we're looking for right now. So again, we want a larger location that does have some warehousing space. So we're looking for about 10 to 15,000 square feet. For perspective, the current store all in is 6,500 square feet, and the sales floor is about 4,200 square feet. So we're looking for somewhere where the sales floor at the new location would be at least double what we have now. Looking in that 4 mile radius. Surface parking is important for grocery. We are not looking in a deeply urban environment, like the Trader Joe's down on View Street. So it is important, to have surface parking for people to do full basket shopping. And then we certainly want somewhere with a loading dock. The current store operations would be a whole lot easier if we had a loading dock. So that's, there's a lot of nice to haves, but those are really our four must haves in the types of sites that we're looking for. This is very broad. You don't need to necessarily memorize all of these things, but this is just a project chart to illustrate where we are in the project and how much further we have to go. So, again, we've been engaging in what we would call the first phase of the project, which is feasibility, especially financial feasibility that the board and I have been working on in the past couple months. But also organizational feasibility, making sure that we are able as a co-op and as a store to be able to scale. And then we have moved into preparation. So, working with the National Co-op Grocers, of which we're a member, on some of these feasibility metrics, engaging member owners, which is literally why we're here tonight, around this topic. And then one of the next steps is we will look to run what's called a member capital campaign, to have members invest in this project. And we'll talk about that a little, but there'll be more information in the coming months about that campaign. So the two arrows on this, the first red arrow on the left is at that thick black line around signing a lease. So that is, we are, short of that. We are still, working up to that, and, have a lot of work to do to get to that, and including, raising funds and a site search. Um, Signing a lease is really the point in which we are fully committed as an organization to an expansion project. At this point, we are intentionally calling it an expansion project. There are still off ramps. We sort of have walked through the business case and the reasons, why we are seriously pursuing this. But if we don't hit some of these feasibility metrics, before we get to that point, there are still, ways to sort of get off the roller coaster. And then the other arrow in the middle of phase two, that's just showing where we are currently. So again, we're digesting the financial feasibility package that we've gotten in the last couple weeks, and continuing to give shape to and scoping out the project and exactly what it'll look like. Um, and then this is just the last thing I wanted to leave you with, and then I will at least stop talking for a few seconds. Um, but these two charts, so the chart on the left is from the state of Maryland. It's a business compass that they put together around the availability of fresh food. And so the white areas are areas of food access, where there is fresh food available. You can see it's a state of Maryland metric, so that DC is blacked out there, and then you can see where the areas that are light blue or darker blue are areas where there's less food access. On the right is what I've alluded to. The state of Maryland does not have this document. It's obviously based on some similar census tracts and everything, but this is our core trade area. And it just struck me in looking at it, how unbelievably similar the our core trade area is, to helping ensure that there's fresh food access within this particular zone. You can literally see some of the shapes being exactly the same. So I happened upon this by accident, but it's sort of been a guiding light for me that we chose as an organization to put a store in this very specific location, back in 1998. And this store has we have grown into our space, and we have helped to ensure fresh food access for the area around this store. So we have, in my mind, a very cool opportunity to think about where our next store is, and what a similar map might look like 20 years from now, based on where we choose.